Like you, I've been wondering whether AI is going to take my job in the next couple years. Now, in my case, that means teaching you the piano over the internet. So let's see if a large language model can teach me some things about the piano. All right, so I've chosen Claude. We're using Sonnet 4.6, that's the model, and I'm going to ask it, can you teach me a song on piano? It says, I'd love to help you learn a song on piano. Okay, so we're in business. Now, for an overview before we start, I'm going to give it 5 tests. I'm going to ask it to do 5 things related to the job of piano teacher. I want it to teach me a song. I'm going to ask it to critique my technique. I'm going to ask it a music theory question. Then for overall feedback on my playing. And then to help me with planning my practice. In each of these areas, I'm going to give it a 5-star rating. So we'll start with learning a song. And it says it would love to help me learn a song. It's asking me now a question about my experience. I'm going to tell it that I know a little. So I have this menu here. I'm going to say, okay, I know a little. And let's go with a pop song. And I'll let it suggest something for me. Okay, it's given me 4 choices here. Which kind of gives me the impression that it's thought about this and it has experience with people asking it to teach them songs. So I'm going to pick Clocks by Coldplay, classic piano riff. And that's what it says too. It says, great choice. Clocks has that iconic hypnotic piano riff that's instantly recognizable. Let's break it down. So let's see how it does. All right, so I've sat with this for a minute and explored everything it's telling me to do. Let's hear the Claude version of Clocks by Coldplay. It sounds like this. You notice I'm using a very awkward set of fingers for these sequences of notes in the right hand. That's because that's what Claude told me to do. And I'm just following all of its instructions. Now, let's remember what the actual piano riff sounds like. So this has been my experience in testing Claude for this video, that it thinks it can teach you a song, but then if you follow its instructions, it is just making things up that have no bearing on the actual piece of music. And it gets closer sometimes than others. There was another situation where it tried to teach me the melody to Can't Help Falling in Love, and it seemed to be the melody to Ode to Joy. Right? And so compare that to Wise Men Say. Totally different. It just means that somewhere in its training data, someone has written out these note names. And if you're not familiar with this term, this is called hallucination. This is a classic example of a large language model thinking that it can answer a question for you and not understanding that it should tell you it actually has no idea what you're talking about. So I'm going to give 0 stars for this first task. I would give it 1 star if it could just tell me that it actually can't help. But I'm giving it 0 stars because it is actively lying and misleading me. So let's move on to the next task. I want it to critique my technique. Before we do that, I want to remind you, the leaders of these AI companies are predicting that within the next couple years, we may have artificial general intelligence. And they define that as a model like this that is as smart as a human across any economically valuable task you can do online. Now, I think that that should include correctly identifying the key of a song, or at the very least, knowing that you can't correctly identify the key of a song. Now, another reason they're supposed to be useful is that they're becoming more and more multimodal. That means that they can look at an image and then respond via text. So I've prepared some images of my hand on the piano keyboard, and I'm going to ask it to critique them. Now, if I saw this image, I would say to the student, well, the first thing to do is release your middle finger. It's curved down in a weird way. Everything else looks pretty good. That would be my response. What it's saying is a bunch of general advice without seeming to realize what's happening with my middle finger. Let me give it another image and see if it notices now. We might need to blur this one out. Okay, in this case, it says, this is a nice improvement. Here's what I notice. The single finger is well curved and striking with the fingertip, which is exactly right. No, Claude, no, it is not exactly right. All right, so I'm gonna give 0 stars on piano technique as well. I at least hoped that it would tell me I shouldn't be asking it for technical advice. And in my testing ahead of this video, there was one time when it told me, actually, I can't give you technique advice, but it's not doing that here. It's receiving a picture of me giving it the bird, and it says that I've improved my technique. So I'm gonna give it 0 stars on piano technique as well. Let's move on to something I expect it to do better with, music theory. So in this case, there's a lot of written information online in text format about music theory. In my experience, it can do a pretty good job explaining music theory concepts. I'm gonna put it through its paces. We'll start with, can you teach me some basic music theory? Okay, and I've read through its response. So it starts by teaching me about notes, half steps and whole steps, scales, intervals, chords, keys, and rhythm. And honestly, it's doing a good job with all of these things. You know, this is essentially like a Wikipedia article, which is probably what it's regurgitating here. Let me dig a little bit deeper on some concept. Let me say, can you help me with functional analysis? I talk about functional analysis a lot on this channel. It's the idea of assigning numbers to chords based on where they are in the key. Okay, this time it responded by telling me that functional analysis is a rich area of mathematics, and it starts telling me about math concepts. So I have to say, not in math, in music. Okay, again, it doesn't seem to know what I'm talking about, but I mean numbering the chords in diatonic harmony. And now it's doing a good job. So it tells me the basic idea of numbering the 7 chords in a key with Roman numerals. It starts with them uppercase, which is incorrect, but then it talks about the shorthand of writing minor chords in lowercase. Really everything here is correct. I'm gonna give it one more test. So I'm gonna ask it to do functional analysis on this chord progression. Here, again, I'm impressed. I'm impressed by the job that it's done. And this is, I think, what they're talking about when these models have gotten better at things like reasoning. It's kind of working through the chords one at a time, and it seems to have some understanding of how different chords fit into the key of A flat major. So I gave it this chord progression: A flat, C7, F minor, D flat minor, A flat over C, and then B flat minor. And it's correctly identifying these things. It says 1 chord, then C is the 3 chord, but making it a dominant 7th, turns it into a secondary dominant. Very good, Claude. Then we go to the resolution, the 6 chord, F minor. It gets all of this right. So I'm very impressed. And this has come up actually with students. I've had members at pianofluency.com on our forum that we have for students copy and paste responses they've gotten from ChatGPT when they've asked it about music theory topics. And often it is close or correct, right? It will often get them pretty close to an understanding of one of these theoretical concepts. There's often something a little bit off because it's a large language model. It can't actually hear the music, right? So again, it's a little bit dangerous territory because it's still apt to hallucination. It's apt to giving you an answer that sounds like an expert answer, but is just a little bit off. So if you're able to then check that with an expert, like my students do when they copy paste these ChatGPT answers into our forum, in that case, it can be kind of useful, right? Because you can make sure that it's not leading you astray, but it's like a more sophisticated Google response. But you want to exercise caution when you're using it that way because it can still give you things that are just completely wrong. So on music theory, I'm going to give it 3 out of 5 stars. It's by far the best that it's done on any of these tasks so far. Let's move on to task number 4. I want to give it some audio that I've recorded and get some overall feedback from it. So I recorded a voice memo. It sounds like this. Okay, so it's Happy Birthday, obviously. I'm going to tell Claude that it's the Moonlight Sonata, and let's see how it does. Can you give me feedback on my piano playing? This is the beginning of the Moonlight Sonata. This is really interesting. So it says, I'd love to give you feedback, but unfortunately, I'm not able to play or analyze audio files directly. I can hear images. You can hear images, but not sound recordings. So I'm going to give it a higher score on this because it goes on from there to give me just generally useful advice. It says record yourself, play it back at a slower speed. That's a little weird, but listening to a recording of your own playing is a great way to learn and improve. It gives some general advice about this piece, all of which is kind of plausible. And then it also tells me to seek outside feedback by going to Reddit or getting a teacher, even for a one-off session. So I'm actually pretty pleased with all of these things, mostly because of the self-awareness. Now, it's not aware enough to be able to tell that I tricked it and that I labeled this audio recording Moonlight Sonata, but it's actually a little bit of Happy Birthday. So I'm going to give it 2 out of 5 stars on this. It didn't really help me directly on this piece of music, and it couldn't tell that I was trying to trick it, but it did honestly tell me to go to a better source of information, and it gave me some generally useful pieces of practice advice. So we're going to give 2 out of 5 stars on audio feedback. The last test is also, I think, going to be a little easier for it. I just want it to make me a plan. I want it to tell me what I should be doing over the course of the next 6 months if I'm a relatively beginner student of pop music. Can you make a practice plan for me for the next 6 months as a beginner, intermediate student of pop piano? Claude says, I'd love to help you build a 6-month practice plan. It's asking me a few quick questions. So I'm going to say I can practice 30 minutes a day. My big weak spot is chords and harmony. And my main goal is play a few full songs confidently. Let's see what it has to say. Okay, this is the best it did on any of the tasks. It actually created a downloadable document for me, which is formatted kind of nicely. And honestly, looking over this plan, almost everything here is pretty sensible. It's telling me to learn some basic chords in C major, suggesting some nice beginner chord-based songs for me, gradually adding in some of these other things. I would probably introduce inversions before these arpeggio and Alberti bass patterns. And in general, I don't teach much Alberti bass for pop piano, but most of what it's referring to here really makes sense. So in the absence of actually having a good source of information to teach you these skills, it wouldn't be terribly useful because, as we've seen, you can't rely on Claude to teach you the specifics of something like the chords to a song. But asking it for general advice like this, what are the general expectations I should have for what skills to learn at different parts of my piano journey, it's not necessarily going to do an awful job at that. And it might be kind of interesting just to get more broad perspective about what types of skills people are typically working on at different points in their progress as piano students. So using Claude in this way, I'm not necessarily opposed to it. If you're an adult hobbyist, it's similar to going to Reddit and seeing what people are talking about there, about what they're working on, depending on their goals and their resources as a piano student. And in fact, the reason that Claude can do this reasonably well is probably because it's, crawled all of Reddit and all of everything that anyone has ever written online about learning to play the piano. So for this final task, I'm going to give Claude 4 stars. As far as 6-month pop piano practice plans go, it did a pretty good job. And it's not very meaningful when it can't also actually teach you to play the songs it's suggesting, or even point you directly to a good learning resource for those things. But the plan itself is nice. So I'm going to give 4 stars. So to wrap up, Claude did pretty abysmally on my test. Now you might say this isn't really fair. These large language models are not focused on music learning. And there are apps that are more specifically angled towards using some form of AI to help with music learning. I think probably the most well-known is Simply Piano. And if you're not familiar, that's an app that can go on a mobile device, and it does have kind of a listening algorithm where you can follow along with sheet music, and it will do a pretty good job of being able to hear whether you're playing the correct notes at the correct time. So there are some cool things about that. Honestly, in preparation for this video, I checked back in on Simply Piano and the current state of their UI. And there are cool things about it. It's similar to Duolingo, right, for language learning. The app itself is really well designed. They're doing a great job with all these little user interface things. So it makes it like a fun game, the same that Duolingo does for learning some basic vocabulary in a new language. But it's also like Duolingo in that it's actually extremely limited. And they kind of bill it as something where you can learn piano by using this app, the same as Duolingo's like, we're giving language learning to the masses. The truth is that you can't really learn to speak a language well through Duolingo. And the same is true with Simply Piano. I've had students come to me and to my membership after having spent several years using the Simply Piano app, and they know the basics of reading sheet music, which is great. You can also get that from a more traditional method book. However, there are all sorts of skills that the app can't teach. And the app is very biased towards teaching you the things that can work on the app, right? So that's why they teach these very simple sheet music arrangements. And it's in a format where there is a right answer and it can tell you whether you've played the correct note in this kind of Guitar Hero style format. It's very different than the ethos of the way that I like to teach. You know, starting from the first assignments I give people, there's a creative aspect where I might tell you to find a simple melody in some different keys. So you are using your ear and exploring the piano keyboard yourself in a more creative way. And because that's so open-ended, it, at least right now, with the quality of these supposedly general models, there's no AI that can kind of keep up flexibly with that sort of teaching. So if you're out there and you're wanting to use one of these LLMs to help you with your hobby of learning the piano, I know that people are doing that because I've had students come to me asking whether or not a ChatGPT answer is accurate. You're welcome to do that. Just keep your wits about you. And my 2 main warnings are to look out for the hallucination thing, look out for the kind of BS factor, and don't rely on the information you're getting if you can't check it on your instrument or you can't ask a real teacher. The other warning I would give is make sure you're not using these as a procrastination tool. It's very common for adult music students to fall into the trap of believing you can think your way around the problem, right? If you just had a little more knowledge of the most effective way to practice, or a little more music theory knowledge, you would be better at piano. And almost always, what you actually need is just more time on the instrument, right? You need to just practice more. You probably know what you need to do. And getting into a conversation with a large language model is more likely to turn into procrastination and kind of fantasizing about how good you're going to be in 6 months if you follow this perfect plan from Claude. When in reality, if you just use that same time making music and experimenting and enjoying the beautiful sounds that you can make on your instrument, you would benefit more from that as a musician. So that's it. You know, I'll be honest that the process of making this video has been kind of comforting to me to realize these large language models are really far from being able to do what I do in my job as an online piano educator. Maybe it will have a similarly comforting effect on you if you do some sort of knowledge work online and you've been hearing these predictions about how the AI is going to replace every single human being in the next couple of years. But who knows? Maybe 2 years from now, we'll look back on this video and the robot TEDs will all be out there teaching everybody piano. I think if they can truly do that, that would probably be a good thing, but I will be out of a job. So with that, thank you for joining me. My name is Ted with Piano Fluency.